It was in 1977 when Janine, my wife, and I were traveling overland towards Australia, and we spent quite a bit of time in Nepal and met a Buddhist monk who spent time with us. And at one stage, he had quite some powers, and that was a new phenomenon for us, how to deal with that. But at one stage, he told me that Sai Baba would be important in my life. And I had no idea who he was talking about. So he said, well, he's a bit like my Lord Buddha and like Lord Jesus. He's a world teacher, etc. He gave me some. Then I went to the Kathmandu bookshop, got a book about Swami. That was, there were one or two books there. And it did not appeal to me. Swami looked to me like sort of an American hippie guru, It did not appeal to me. So I bought the book, but I didn't read it. And then when we were in Australia, a year later, and my mum came over and she said, "No, didn't you write to me that somebody would be important in your life?" And I said, yeah. She said, "Well, what do you know about him?" And I said, "Well, not much." She said, "Well, if he's going to be important, you better find out, like mothers will do." And so then I read Sai Baba and the Psychiatrist, The Holy Man and the Psychiatrist from Samuel Sandweiss. Beautiful book. And I was instantly moved and realized that, for me, Lord Jesus had returned to the earth. And we cut out a picture and put it on the altar and tried to make contact with some other Sai devotees, but couldn't find anybody because there was no organization in Australia. The Howard Murford was, of course, an Australian, but he wasn't there at the time. So I wrote to the United States, and they wrote back to me and said, no, you need to talk to Howard, but he wasn't there. Anyway, we got some tapes from the Hollywood Sai Center to learn some bhajans and did that at home. Because there was nobody around us. So that was 1978. And then in 79, we moved to a small town in South Australia, Narracourt, and Janine had to go and see a GP and walked into this room, and it was full of pictures of Swami. So that was Dr. Vidyananthan, as some of you might know. He's passed away now. And so we became close and had a few people around who started singing bhajans. And then in 1980, we went for the first time to Swami. Of course, in those days, there were only pretty poor quality photos of Swami available. There were some Super 8 films that we saw. I never forget the very first Super 8 film that I saw that just blew me away, to see Swami in Darshan walking around. So in 1980, we went there for the first time, wondering if he would sort of allow me in, and would talk to me. But that was wonderful. We had interviews, and he guided us, and so that's where it all started. And he then recalled because we had been given a topaz stone by this Buddhist monk, and Janine had it around her neck. So Swami said, "Oh, what's this?" "Yes, Tibetan Lama," and then manifested for her a silver pendant. So he made that connection to our calling through this Buddhist monk, but I now think was probably Swami anyway. So that's how it all started.
Thanks, brother. Would you want to share some of the first experience that you met when you saw Baba in person? How was it?
I was, it's difficult to find the words. Like I said, I wasn't too sure. I come from a Christian background where sort of guilt and those things, doing the wrong thing and getting punishment out of the Old Testament type thing was deeply ingrained in me. So I was wondering, I hadn't lived a perfect life. Would Swami be willing to talk to me, etc.? And of course he did. But what amazed me most, I think, initially was how natural Swami moved around, manifested vibhuti, made rings for people, etc. Not as if there was a performance, just like we have seen in the film. That was just so incredible. Of course, in those days, you always had the first or second row, and so it was very close to Swami, and that was very beautiful. And about the third day, he called us in for an interview, and then you realize that Swami in the interview room is very different than the one who gives darshan. He is such an incredible joker and so sweet and so loving. The very first thing he did, what blew my mind, was he manifested in a big bowl of Indian sweets. I forgot the name of it. And there were about 15 with us in the interview room. And he asked somebody to sort of walk around with him, one of the students, to give it to everybody. And my first thought was, I'm not sure that there's enough for everybody in it. Not to worry, because it kept growing. So everybody had plenty, and then Swami, it's gone. So it's very beautiful. Yes.
Nice, brother. So, what we know that you're part of the Sai teaching program during the early stages of SSC. Do you want to share any advice or recommendations for these current and future SSC teachers?
Yes, I was an early SSC teacher, first in Australia and then in Holland, because I was for 2.5 years back in Holland, and was their national secretary and involved in setting up the SSC program. And I, one of the things what we always held dear to us was to try and do SSC very much for the community, and that is something I think we still need to do more of. Like in the conversation with this morning about what's the Sai mission, etc. I think we need to do more in our programs what connects to the community, because Swami wants his teachings to go out. He said once to some people who, about my name, there's no need to talk. It's the teachings what I want to every corner of the world. And of course the SSE program is perfect for that, particularly the community SSE HV. Yeah.
Thanks, brother. And we also came to know that you are one of the key responsible person for developing the first Australian Sai website during those ages.
Yeah.
How the idea came through, and how it was difficult during those days to come up with the website, whether you were able to manage it on your own or...
Yeah, I had been the publisher of the SaiOrgAustralia in the 90s. Just imagine on these very small Macintosh computers with a screen like this, and we sort of designed the SaiOrgAustralia, but it was a beautiful seva to do. If I may, one night I was working very late and I thought, Swami, I can't do it. I need to go to sleep. But needs to be ready tomorrow morning. All of a sudden I had darshan from Swami on the screen. All of a sudden he was on the screen. Nobody was awake in the house. I just had him completely for it. It was beautiful, beautiful. And then I forgot the year. I think it was 97 or 98 that Mr. Ramanathan was the central coordinator in Australia, and we were keen to get an website presence. So I learned to write one. It wasn't all sort of click and do. You had to write whatever the language was. I did it on my own. It was called God Lives in India. The front page can still be found on the internet because it's all archived. The details of it have gone. Some of it I would still have, I think, on an old computer. But it was a beautiful thing to do, because you had another way of connecting to the devotees, and like I said, that was something where I made very clear that needed to be accessible to anybody who would look up Sai Baba or about spiritual teachings, etc. So it was very closely linked to it was an organizational website, but the content was done in such a way that it was easily accessible to people, and it was a beautiful thing to do. We did it for about 3-4 years, and then somebody else took over. Yes.
Nice, brother. What sort of impact Swami made in your life after you met and before you met him?
Everything. It has taken time, but I have learned to understand that Swami is behind everything. What we do, what you do, what I do, and it's of course we so do I regularly get sidetracked, and you think you do, but as soon as you stop and think, you realize he's the doer. And to give you a couple of examples, I think I told you that I spent a few years back in Holland in the late 80s and came back to Australia in 1990. I did work in Romania at the time, just after Ceausescu was killed, the president of Romania. He was not a very nice person as a dictator. I was asked to go there, set up some programs for children who had been taken away into homes and were treated extremely badly. And there were lots of babies with AIDS, and they were HIV positive, and they were made HIV positive because they were given blood donations from Africa, from where the blood was not pure, and so. It was an awful situation. So the work, what I did was set up some projects. But, whenever you work in painful situations, that hits you yourself as well. And looking back, I got deeply traumatized by that experience. I just couldn't get rid of the mental pictures of these babies, because the nurses didn't want to touch those babies because they were afraid in their ignorance, afraid that they would get AIDS themselves. So I don't know if you know, but if you don't touch babies, they die. Babies need skin contact, and so these babies were suffering incredibly. And I felt, with Swami's grace, I had to touch these babies. I had to go to those places where, if they had to be like that, I should at least make the effort to make proper contact. And some of those kids in homes were treated like worse than animals. So that made a deep impression, and I carried those images that I couldn't get rid of. And then in 1990 was the World Conference, and I was going to the World Conference, and I arrived just before in early November. And we were asked to arrive late at night, and we were asked to sleep in what was the high school, because people arrived late and the ashram was already sort of closed. But I was keen to take part in the early morning Omkar, etc. And before the Omkar, of course, people walk around the mandir. I'm sure they still do, but in that time. So I went up to the meditation tree and then go down, because the gate was still closed. I knew the back entrance, they could go there. So I walked around with the group of residents from the ashram, and then fell on my knees under Swami's room, where he was staying up and praying to him. And all of a sudden, it was like the old cameras, the film roll was pulled out of my head, and all those mental pictures that were haunting me were pulled out. And I've never had trouble with that anymore. I've not lost any sleep, and I can talk about it without becoming deeply emotional about it. So they are the little things that Swami does. Never talked about, Never talked about. I had another little incident. I broke my arm in Tasmania once during a holiday, and was on Christmas Eve of all times, and I ended up in the Hobart Hospital. I had a very complex fracture with the bone actually sticking out. It was very, very bad, and so I was rolled into the theater, quite fearful, and before I went under, Swami was standing there in the corner of the room, sort of blessing me, and I knew everything would be all right. So there's so many things. We moved house a little while ago. It's now 2 years ago actually, and what do you choose? Which one shall we make? We walked into this place, and Janine, my wife, had a whiff of vibhuti straight away. So within 5 minutes, we had decided this house is ours. So Swami guides everything, and it's a matter for me of staying in that awareness, because he's there. We forget. He doesn't forget. He's always there. There's just a few little examples.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for sharing your valuable insights.
Okay.
It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Sarah.